Again, welcome to Python programming language. In this lectures, we're going to cover Python file operations. These lectures cover chapter 6 of our course textbook. Our main objective, again, is to go through the file input and output operations, and also how to use loops to process files. From our previous program so far, we normally get an input using the input function from the keyboard. So we always get input by using the keyboard. Also, we can assign a value to a variable using the assignment operators. Those are the two options to get an input into our program, either the keyboard using input function or assignment operator. Also, when we execute our program, we always see our result on our screen and we cannot save it. So these lectures will introduce us to the concept of file operations, which means here we are going to get our input from a file. Here we are going to use test files. In Python, we can get an input from a database system or from a test file, and this will make our program more realistic, because in the real world, we are not, if we have tons of data, we are not going to sit down and type in the input to a program. We're normally going to use the program to access data from a file that has been saved or a database system. Also, when we get a result, we want to save the result. So a good option here is that when we execute our program finish, we want our result to be saved into a database system or a file. We will cover how to use the database system, and that will be our last lectures in our textbook. In these lectures, we're going to use test files. So here we say for a program to retain data between the times it is run, we must save that data. So data is saved to a file, typically on a computer disk, our hard drive, or a flash drive. Also, the saved data can be retrieved at any time, and we can use it at any time. So writing data to means we are saving data into our file. And also output file, a file that data is written to, is called the output file. So this is the concept of writing data to a file. Let's assume this is our hard drive, and we have a variable. In this variable, we have a pay rate, which is 1865. We also have another variable, employee ID, and employee ID is 6451Z. Then we have a variable for employee name. So these are the three data, and we can again save this data into a file. So here data is copied from the RAM, which is our random access memory, to the file. Anytime we are working with our program, in this case Python program, our data that we enter will be in the RAM. We always work from the RAM. So we will go through this concept and we will see the syntax. So first we start with the file input and output. So reading data from means process of retrieving data from a file. So when we say we're writing data to, means we are saving the data to a file. Now reading data from a file means we are getting an output data from a file to be used in a program. So here we say input file will be a file from which data is read. Now we have three steps when a program uses a file, whether we are reading or we are writing to a file. Always we have to follow these three steps. First, we need to open the file. Then we process the file. The process the file can be either we are writing data to the file or we are reading data from the file. Then after we finish our process, we need to close the file. So always we have to follow these three steps. Open the file, process the file, then close the file. So the next is reading data from a file. We can see the arrow is changing now. This means we have a data in our flash drive or the hard drive, and we are going to get the data into the program. In this case, we need to save the program somewhere in our file, so we may have variables to store the data. So there are different types of files and also file access method. So here in general, there are two types of files, the text file and the binary file. Normally, the text file is what we are used to. It contains data that has been encoded as a text. For example, my name is Charles, employee ID, everything is alphabetical or order. But a binary file is what is understood by the program. It normally contains a binary data 0101. So we say a binary file contains data that has not been converted to a text. So two ways to access data stored in a file. We can use the sequential access or direct access. A sequential access means if I have a data, let's say we have 100 values. If I want to access the last value, I have to go through from beginning to the end. So I'll go through 1, 2, 3, up to 100, the last value. The direct access means we can jump to anywhere. So if I want to access the 100, instead of starting from beginning, I can just go straight to the end. And that's the quickest way. So we say the sequential access, the file read sequentially from beginning to end. It cannot skip ahead, but with direct access can jump directly to any piece of data in the file. So the best way and the fastest way to access data is using the direct access method. But in this course, we're going to use the sequential access, which is covered in our textbook. So first, every file should have a file name and also the file object. So also we know a file from beginning may have extension. For example, MS Word document, the extension is .doc. Python file, the extension is py. Java file, the extension is .java. So a file name extension will be a short sequence of characters that appears at the end of the file preceded by a period. And this file extension is very important because that's what the operating system can identify what type of file we have. So if I have a file named balance.java, it means it's a Java file, or balance.doc, it means Microsoft Word document. Also, we should have a file object. So object normally will associate with a specific file. In Python, when we want to access a file, we need to create the file object. So if I want to read, write, or any process, I always refer to the file object. And the file object refers to the file also. So here we say the file object provides a way for a program to work with the file. The file object references by a variable. Again, we shall see the step, the syntax soon. So that's the concept here. Variable name references a file object that's associated with a variable. So we have the variable name and the file object which associate with the file. So how do we open a file? In Python, we use the function name open. So open function is used to open a file. Now we need to create a file object first and associate it with the file on the disk before, again, we open it. So this is the syntax or the format. We have file object, assign, open, the file name, and the mode. The mode will be the task we want to perform. For example, if I want to read, I'm going to use R for read. If I want to write, I'm going to use W. The file name normally is the name of the file. So here we say the mode is a string, specify how the file will be opened. Example, either reading only, writing, or append. So reading means we are reading the data into some location. That's the data will be input. Writing means we are putting the data into the file. Append also means we are putting the data into the file. But when we use append, if there's an existing file, we are not going to overwrite it. So append means we are going to start from the end of the file. But if you use write, if there's a data already in the file, it's still going to start from beginning. So which means we are going to delete the existing file already, the data in the file. So next we need to specify the location of a file, very important. Otherwise Python cannot see the file. Normally what we do is that our program and the test file can be in the same directory. That means the same folder. So in this case, we don't need to specify the directory. But if they are in different folders or different location, then we need to specify the directory. So here we say that if open function receive a file name that does not contain a path, assuming the file is in the same directory as a program, as we said. So if the program and the file is in the same folder, then we don't need to specify the directory, the path. We don't need to specify the path because they are in the same folder or directory. Now, if a program is running and the file is created, it is created in the same directory as the program by default. So if I'm creating a new file while the program is running, the file will be created in the same folder, in the same directory. So here we can specify the alternative path and the file name in the open function argument if we want to change the directory or location. Preface the path string literally with a letter again, R. So we're going to see examples soon. So next is writing data to a file. The method, a function that belongs to an object, as we discussed about object-oriented programming. A method is always a function that belongs to an object or a class. A function normally doesn't belong to any class or any object. So a method, a function that belongs to an object, it performs operation using that object. And we discussed this in object-oriented programming. So here, if we have a file objects write method, it can be used to write data to the file. And this is the format. So we have the file variable dot write string. So in this case, the file variable is the object. Remember object-oriented programming, we have a class with a method in the class. If we create an object with a method type, all the method in that class can be used, but always we have to start with the object name first, then the type of method we want to use in the class. So a file should be closed using the file object close method. So this is the format, file variable dot close. Now reading data from a file, we use the method read. So file object method that read entire file content into memory only works if the file has been open for reading. So first, as we said, if we want to do any file operation, we have to open it first, then we'll do operation. When we finish, we close it. Then when you use the read method, the content return as a string. So if I want to use same as we use the input function, the data is returned as a string. If you want to use an arithmetic operation, then we have to convert it to either int or float. We also have a method readLine method. It's the same concept of read, but we say read method will read entire file content. By the readLine method, the file object method that read a line from the file. So it's only going to read one line from the file. So the line return as a string, including \n, which is the new line concept. So we also have the read position. The read position, that's the marks the location of the next item to be read from a file. So the best way to explain all this is by going through an example. So this program write 3 lines of data to a file. So we have our main method. So first thing here, we are working with file. So the file must be existing. So we are assuming we already created a test file named philosophers.txt. .txt means it's a test file. So this file will be in the same directory as the program here, the same folder. So here first we say open a file named philosophies.txt. So we use the open method, philosophy.txt, and the mode is write because the goal is to write into the file. So this will allow us to write the content into a variable named out file. So now this is what we're going to do now. Write the names of the three philosophers to the file. So first we have, again, the file object is out file. So out file.write. First thing we have John Locke. Second we have David Hume. Third we have Edmund Burke. So here again, our file object is out. The name out file can be any name. So we said the open is a method and we have to associate it with the file object. Yeah, so the file object is outfile.open. We open philosophers.txt. The mode is W, which means we are writing. So we use the write method to write. Write means we are saving our data into the file. So the file name is philosophers.txt. So here we write three names. We can see we repeat it 3 times. So we finish. After that, we close the file. Then we call the main method and we can run it. So when we run it, we open the philosophers.txt. We should see only these 3 data in. Remember, write means we are writing the content from beginning. So if there's a content already or a data in the philosophers.txt file, it's going to be overwritten. It's going to be deleted. So we have 3 items. So next is how do we concatenate a new line to and strip it from a string. Either we can join a new line to a string or we can strip it. So in most cases, we say data items written to a file are values referenced by variables. So usually it's necessary to concatenate a new line to data before writing it. We can carry out using the plus operator in the argument of the write method. Also, in many cases, we need to remove the new line and the \n from a string after it is read from a file. In this case, we are going to use a method named rstrip. So rstrip normally remove the new line from a string after we have read from a file. So the string method that strips specific characters from end of the file. Again, rstrip will strip a character from the end of the file. So next is how do we append data to an existing file? Appending data to existing file means the content of the file will not be deleted. When we write to a file again, any content in the file will be deleted. Append means we input the data into the file from the end of it. So here we say when open file with W mode, if the file already exists, it is overwritten. But to append data to a file using A mode, if a file exists, it's not erased. And if it does not exist, it will be created. So data is written to a file at the end of the current content. With W, data is written to a file at the beginning of the file, the content. So writing and reading numeric values, here we say the numbers must be converted to a string before they are written to a file. So anytime we have values and we want to write it to a file, first we need to convert it to a string. So we can use the string function, str function, to convert values to a string before, again, we read it into a file. So here, numbers must be converted to string before they are written to a file. So numbers are read from a text file as a string. So if I have values and I want to do arithmetic operation, if I get the data from a file, it's like using the input. If I get data using input function from a keyboard, I always have to convert to int or float in order to do arithmetic operation. The same concept here. If I open a file and read data into a variable, I need to convert that data to either int or float in order to do arithmetic operations. Otherwise, the values will be known as a string. So let's see an example here. Normally, this program is going to read and display the content of the philosopher text file. Previously, we write our data into it. Now we are going to read from the file now. So first thing we do, as usual, we open the file, but this time our mode will be R because we are reading data from philosophers.txt. Previously it was W, which means later we use the write method to write into the file, to save the data to the file. So to read, we use the read method. So here we have the file object again named infile. So infile.read, and we read it to file content. Here we are not going to do any operation. So after we read it, we just close the file. Then if we want to do any arithmetic operation, etc., we can do. But again, here we are not doing operation. The only thing, we're going to print the content. So we read the data from the file into the file content variable. After we close the file, we print the content of it, what we read. Also, we can use loops to process files. Since files have a lot of data, we know that we can use loops to go through all the data in the files. So we say files typically used to hold large amount of data. So loop is typically involved in reading from and writing to a file. If I'm reading a lot of data, I may use the loop to go through. If I'm writing also, I can use the loop. So often the number of items stored in a file is unknown. So the readLine method uses an empty string as a sentinel when the end of the file is reached. So readLine, we don't know the data, how many data. So we have to have some sentinel value or sentinel something. So empty string. When we reach the end of the line, the next will be empty string. So that means the end of it. So the concept here is while line not equal to empty string. So in this case, I can read the whole line. So here we are using a loop, while loop with sentinel value as empty string. This will signal, condition will signal when we get empty string, it means we reach the end of the line. So again, the readLine method uses an empty string as a sentinel when end of the line is reached. So the general logic for detecting the end of the line. So the first thing we need to do, we open the file. Now we use the readLine to read the first line from the file. Now, did the readLine return an empty string? If it hasn't returned the empty string, it means we need to process the item that was just read from the file. Then we use the readLine again to read the next line from there. But if we read empty string, it means we reach the end. So in this case, we close the file. So this is an example. This program will read the content of the philosopher.txt file one line at a time. So first thing we do again, we open the file. Our mode is R to read. So we read 3 lines from the file. Infile.read line, and infile.read line again, infile.read. So we have 3 lines. We save the content in line 1, line 2. Then we close it. Now here we're going to print the data that was read. So we print line 1, line 2, and line 3. The whole idea here is how do we use the file operations. So here I want to read. So I open the file first, then I use the read method. In this case, I want to read 1 line, so I use the read line method. Then we close it. Then I can do an operation I want to. Also using the Python for loop to read lines. Python allows programmer to write a for loop that automatically read lines in a file and stops when the end of the file is reached. So the format is here for line, and we have to have the file object. Then we have the statement. So this loop will iterate once over each line in the file till the end. So let's see an example here. This program will prompt the user for sales amount and then write those amounts to the sales.txt file. So that's our main method. We get the number of days. So here we use the keyboard input to get the number of days. into a variable named number of days. Then we open our new file. The file name is sales.txt. Then we are going to write into it. So we have open sales.txt, write into sales file. So that's our file object here. So now we're going to get the amount of sales for each data, then we write it to the file, which means we save it to the file. So we are using the for loop. So we say for count in range 1 to number of days plus 1. The number of days will tell us, for example, if the number of days is 10, then it will give us 10 values for each cells for the 10 days. So we know the range starts from 0. If it's 10, from 0 to 9, so we add 1 to it. We start from 1, then num days plus 1. Then we get the cells for 1 day. So we use the input, enter the cells for 1 day, the keyboard. We convert the date. Again, when we use the input, the data will be string, but we want the data to be in float. So we convert it, we put it in cells. And remember, this is a loop. So if the number of days is 20, we are going to enter all the values. Then we write the sales amount to the file. So in order to write the sales amount, we have to use the file object, which is sales file. So sales file dot write. And we are writing to where the content is in sales variable. So we have the sales. So after we write finish, we close the file. Then if we want, in this case, we want to print that data written to sales.txt. So that will be the conclusion of our lectures. Again, these lectures, we start with the concept of file operations in Python. We only cover how to read and write to a file. And we saw the syntax. Again, we may see more example in the class, and thank you.